Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com. Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Seth Greene. Today, I've got the good fortune to be interviewing Marc Adams from Acquisitions for You. With $22 billion in funding support, we help founders and boards double value in 12 months or less in 1 million plus EBITDA businesses. Marc, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Seth, thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate that very compact intro. In fact, I'm going to steal it and use it myself.
You are welcome to. Greatly appreciate you being on the show. Let's go back in time a little bit. How did you get started?
Well, how did I get started? Well, I'll break it into two. Let me give you how this got started, and then if you want to know how I got started, I can bore you with that too.
Okay.
But if I take you back with me, so first of all, Seth, this was accidental, man. It really wasn't planned. So if I take you back to 2020, when we had the pandemic around, it hit in February, March of that year, and everybody went into lockdown all over the world. By the end of that year, November, December, we were allowed to go out in little groups of 4. I split my time between the UK and the US. When this was going on, I was back in the UK with the family. And I took myself off to get a medical test. Long story short, unfortunately, that came back with stage 4 cancer and 6 months to live. So when you're faced with that reality, your first thought is, have I done enough? How am I going to look after my family? And so I went into surgery in January 2021. And just to paint the picture, my wife is at home, my kids are at home, my son Thomas is now 14, he was 10 at the time, and my other 2 kids, Matthew and Joshua, are now 23 and 19, but obviously they were 4 or 5 years younger. So they take the primary cancer out, and you got an 8-week wait time before you can figure out what life is going to be. And they took it out on the hope that they might give me more than 6 months. Maybe I get a year and a half, maybe I get 2 years. And bear in mind, I'm at stage 4, so not good. But while I'm doing that, you get very focused on, unfortunately, while I'm having the operation in one of the central London hospitals, I got the original strain of COVID. Now, this is before the vaccines, just before the vaccines. And it was in Donald Trump's first term. So we're going back into a little bit of time. So I'm recovering from home, beautiful rolling hills out on the right-hand side, over in the corner, door to the bedroom, dressing area, bathroom. And my 10-year-old Thomas walks in every morning. God love him. You know what 10-year-olds are like. You know, they just love their parents. So 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, lunchtime, afternoon tea. We do afternoon tea in the UK, my friend. And tea time, he's just checking on dad. But in that, he's in lockdown too. And for our schools, that year of lockdown was Xbox Kingdom for them, because they weren't really geared for schools, but they were really geared to learn Xbox. So he's trying to teach it to me. I'm not that good. And by the end of that week, when I'm recovering from hospital and I still got COVID, it's pretty evident that dad's pretty rubbish with Xbox. But I got a call come in on the Thursday afternoon, LA time in the morning, from one of my clients. And on the back of that call, he chose to break it up because he was like bored with the ritual of, what am I going to try and teach dad today that he's not going to get? And so we started talking about the call. And it was just one of those moments where I just sort of said, try as I might, I work with businesses from a private equity point of view. 9 out of 10 of them never really get the value they need, or they don't sell. So he just asked why. And I just said, because owners need more. And they need more because by the time they finish paying all the fees and everything else that goes with the sale of a business, they haven't got enough. And they realize that when they start to sell. And immediately immediately his question to me was, so what are you doing to help the 9 out of 10? And I said, well, I don't really do anything with the 9 out of 10, Tommy. I really focus on the one that we can buy. And he said, but Dad, what happens to the mums and dads in those businesses if they get COVID and die and they haven't sold them? Who's going to look after their families? Flummoxed. I had no answer. I just had nothing that I could say other than I just don't know. And his response to that was, don't you think, or he wasn't quite like that. He said, you need to help those guys. Those are the ones that need the help, not these other ones. And so I made a loose commitment that I'd look at it, not realizing what it would lead to. And it took me 2 years to write a book, which is called The Secrets to 10xing Your Business and Cashing Out Tax-Free. You can see it behind me on the billboard at Times Square. It's become a bestseller, but anybody listening won't be able to see that. Which led to a podcaster picking it up, just having a conversation about it. And what we were really talking about is, what can you do to help these business owners in any company make a difference so that they get to a point of any age where they can sell the business and keep an awful lot more of it. And fast forward, that's led to a complete pivot for the business. We're a small company, there are 25 of us, but we're all focused on what we now call the double and keep it framework. And if you roll forward a bit more, you talk about the 22 billion, that's from 2 family offices. That was just one meeting with each family office outlining what we're trying to do, with their verbal commitment to support us, which led to the funding availability for us. But there's a step that happens before that. And Q4 last year, we raised another 500 million. So $500 million. Sounds great, doesn't it? Sounds like a big number. But it's all geared towards helping business owners double the value of their business in a year or less without them having to have any equity dilution, without them having to service any debt by borrowing money and obviously having to repay it back with interest. We're using our capital to build a bigger group in partnership with them, with a view to then selling it so that they can cash out with an awful lot more and keep a lot more. And if we get enough time, we can also structure them to reduce the liabilities and the fees they have to pay when they leave, when they do exit a business, which includes the tax. So in a summary, my friend, this began from a selfish private equity idiot called Marc Adams in the UK that got a second chance in life because I cleared the cancer. This January was the 5-year anniversary, which means I'm officially in the clear. I never had any drugs. They think COVID was what saved me. And they think that, Seth, because I got through the 8 weeks and I went back to see my consultant, and Mark sat me down and said, I've got good news and bad news for you. And I'm like, okay, well, what more news could you have that could be any worse than what you gave me? So I said, I'll have the good news. He said, the good news is we can't find any signs of the cancer, like the secondaries. And I went, that's great. So what's the bad news? And he said, the bad news is we have no idea why. And I went, why is that bad news for me? And he said, no, it's bad news for me. I said, well, you keep your bad news because that's good news. But when we got into the discussion, Seth, as to why was that the case, obviously in the medical profession, they're not going to commit themselves, and they genuinely didn't know. So I said, well, what do you think? He said, well, I think, and I said, yeah, come on, spill the beans, tell me. And what had happened around April 21, so that's 3 months after I'd had the op, was you were beginning to see a few medical journals from around the world come up, but the kind of things that you and I don't see, but the professionals do, where there were about half a dozen, maybe 6, 8, 9 other cases like me that had late stage cancer, not much chance of surviving, that had already been diagnosed stage 4, didn't expect to go to live very long, that got the original strain of COVID, and now they don't have the cancer anymore. So my immediate reaction was, we got to bottle it. We could sell this. This is the cure. And he said, no, Mark, it doesn't work that way. And so it turns out what happens for some people, if you're in reasonable nick, and I was in pretty good nick, I'm pretty fit, I eat carefully. The kind of things you kind of do when you become a parent, right? It changes you. I don't go out drinking and things like that I did when I was a single guy. But he thinks that what COVID did was drive my immune system into overdrive. And with being basically healthy and well nourished from a nutrition point of view, he thinks all that stuff forced my immune system into overdrive. And the immune system doesn't say, let's get rid of the cold and leave COVID. It just blitzes. And it turns out your immune system is one of the most amazing things that you possibly could have at your defense, at your beck and call, to help you fight things off. And they still think that that was what helped me get rid of that, all those secondaries. as a result of COVID kicking it into overdrive, which they don't think would have happened otherwise. Now, to be fair, Seth, I'm not exactly willing to go back and say, okay, let's give me back the original strain and stick the cancer in and see if we can go again. But the whole thing had been life-changing. So I get to be lucky enough to chat with you excitedly and appreciatively with a really positive outlook, because I feel like I got a second chance. And with my second chance, I'm less of the private equity, I don't know who's listening to this, but can I say private equity twat that I used to be? Maybe that's not an appropriate word. Let's bleep it out. And more of actually, this is a massive issue. To get serious for a moment, businesses all over the world, sub 100 million, let's say, it's not really that high, it's definitely sub 50, find themselves in a position when they're privately held, where somebody at some point, whether they're young people and they want to sell to move on and just take some money down because they want to pay down the school fees or they want to pay down the mortgage, or whether they maybe want to retire or just want to do something else because they're fed up with that niche and what they're doing, they just don't plan for the situation where, shit, we're going to get this, but by the time, if you're in California or in New York, you could lose up to 50%. Now, elsewhere around the world, it's not as much as that. It's still going to be 30, 35, unless you've got some schemes that the governments in each country have made available that you've taken advantage of. That's where you are. So what happens a lot is people can't afford to go. So they end up working in those businesses sometimes because they've still got bills to pay, but they can't get enough from the sale. And the organic growth is going to take them another 20 years, and they haven't got that time. So where we've been incredibly lucky and what we do with the funding that we've got is there's no other funding like this that we are aware of anywhere in the world, where you don't need equity dilution and you're not servicing any debt, but we specifically focus it towards growth to at least double the value and then exit the business, hopefully with an awful lot more, definitely with more in your pocket, but hopefully with even more in your pocket because you get to save on some of the fees and some of the taxes that go with it. That doesn't always happen. It depends personally on circumstance, but it definitely does happen for a lot of people. So that's how we got towards this. And I'm trying to help as many people as I can see what they could do. And the book is a way for them to get started. And for us to help, it needs to be at least 500,000 in profit or more. I know we said 1 million at the top of the show, and that's where it was when we at that moment in time. But with the funding we've got available now and the way that we can pull things together and organize things, we can drop a bit lower than that. But for those business, what do you do with all those companies that are less than 500,000 in profit, Seth? So the book is designed for them to maybe get 2 or 3 things out of the book that will help them to that next step. And then if they want to find out more about how they can do the double and keep it framework, once they get to that level, they can hit me up and we'll quite happily chat to them. There's no obligation for them to work with us. We're on a wait list, and as a small firm, we can't help everybody. So that's why the book came out. Oh my God, you said to me at the top of the show, 20 minutes, rapid fire. We don't take long. And I've just consumed all 20 minutes answering question number 1. I'm not a very good guest, am I?
Well, congratulations. You've had an incredible journey, and obviously glad that you're healthy and able to be helping others so much. Can you explain the double and keep it blueprint?
Yeah, so what happens with that? So it's in essence, what we're doing is if you look at a business, let's imagine any business you like doing less than 1 million in profit, which we call EBITDA. So what's happening there is if you take that company to market and you try and value it to sell, you're likely to be worth, sadly, a lot of your listeners won't like this, like to hear this, about what your profit is. There are exceptions, and there are sectors that defy that. We all know about the AI startups that are selling for 2 billion, that have been trading for 18 months, doing an annualized revenue run rate of 100 million. These are exceptions. When you look at the kind of businesses that most people run day in, day out, the HVACs, the electrics, the more normal businesses, some would say boring, but they're not boring, but the more normal businesses, they don't get those benefits. And now you might argue with me and say, no, Mark, if it's doing 600,000 in profit, it's worth 1.2. Okay, I'll give you that. It's still not enough. And so the principle is, how do you double the value significantly so that you can make an awful lot more money for the founders and the owners? And the way that we do that is use our capital to bring together other companies into a group. You see, if I can turn 1 million in EBITDA or 750,000 in EBITDA to 5 million in EBITDA, I'll say that again. If I can turn 750K in EBITDA into 5 million of EBITDA, then at and you subscribe to the principle that you're worth 1 to 1.5, maximum 2 times when you're at 750K of profit, you're going to be worth 4 to 5 times at 5 million. So there's an aggregation there that by grouping these companies together with our capital, we can help owners benefit from. Now, we're a business, we get paid out of that as well, but they still make so much more money than they would have done. Now, people can do this themselves. The challenge for lots of companies is, though, maybe they don't attract private equity. Maybe they do attract private equity, but not on terms that make any sense to them. Maybe they're going to be diluted so much that they're in no better position. And maybe they're a business that is trading really well from a cash flow point of view, but there's not enough in there for them to borrow from a bank, because if you borrow from the bank, the profit you're making is then going to go towards repaying the loan and the interest. So the growth that you want to achieve by reinvesting your profit back into marketing, some of it's gone because you've got to pay back for the loan. So this is a very, very neat way of not having to do either one of those, no equity dilution and no debt service, where if we can bring the right companies together into a bigger group, it will be much more valuable, and then that would be sold. Now, a lot of people ask me, can you help us with growth capital? We don't want to sell. And we can, but we choose not to. Because the problem I'm particularly trying to solve for is all those people that spent all that time building a business, serving a community, looking after their customers, looking after their families, that don't have enough to retire on. And that's why we solve for this problem. And it's in keeping with the mission that I started to pivot towards on the back of the promise I made to my son. So I stay focused on that when I could go and do all these things, because that's the promise I made. By the way, my son Tommy is now 14, demanding bloody royalties, cheeky little monkey, because he's in the first part of the book. But we wouldn't be here but for that comment that he made. And it's been quite a long time figuring out, so what does the double and keep it framework look like? But that's what it is in its essence. We'll double the value using our capital to coordinate companies together, and then together we'll sell them. We'll lead the negotiation on that to get it sold so that all the owners make a lot more money. And that works pretty well.
That sounds absolutely incredible. We greatly appreciate your time. We know it's incredibly valuable for our folks watching and listening. Where is the best place for them to go to get the book? And where is the best place for them to go to learn more about you?
So I will send you a QR code, an email address, and a WhatsApp number. Bingo bongo, they can do that. And then with the QR code, if they want to reach out to the website, check us out. Everybody wants to check you out, right? Some British guy with an accent, you can never trust them, right? So they want to check me on LinkedIn. They want to ask any questions. They can send me a WhatsApp. They can send me an email. Those are the easiest things for most people to do. And then if they want to grab a copy of the book, then they can. I think it's $9, something like that. It's on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. And so that's how they can reach me. We'd be happy to try and help anybody. And irrespective of most people we won't be able to work with, but we'll try and help anybody that we can take those next steps, because this is really important shit.
All right. Well, we greatly appreciate your time. This has been Seth Greene with Marc Adams here from acquisitions4u.com. Marc, thanks so much for joining us.
Seth, thank you so much for having me. I'm deeply grateful, very appreciative. Let's change the world one company at a time.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, everybody, for watching or listening. We'll talk to you or see you next time.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.